And so Jesus to Mary and Martha and to their brother Lazarus. Because Lazarus, would die again. His resurrection was a preview, a trailer, if you will, to the resurrection to eternal life that we all will anticipate and we all have been promised by Jesus. But Lazarus would die yet again, and so Mary and so Martha also would. As well as all the other faithful people that we talked about last week and we heard about in Hebrews 11 last week. Abel, Enoch, well, he was taken up into heaven, but Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Moses' parents, David and many others, all those great cloud of witnesses that we're surrounded by, as it says. We're surrounded by the great cloud of people whose faith throughout the centuries gave reality to their hope and substance to our faith and evidence of the things that we hope for and the things that we have not seen. Evidence, the testimony that Jesus did suffer under Pontius Pilate, was crucified and died and rose again on the third day and ascended into heaven and is now seated at the right hand of the Father, where he sits next to him and is able to say to him, Father, be merciful to these people because I know them because I am one of them. And you've heard me say that for weeks. It's wonderful to know that. It's good to know that. It's reassuring to know that. And we're surrounded by that cloud of witnesses. Not only those people, but all the people around us too, one another. So we can look at one another and we can be upheld by one and encouraged by one another's faith. It's like walking together in a group along a road or along a path. When you stumble or trip a little bit or not unsure of your footing, somebody's always there to catch you or to guide you by the shoulder, by the elbow, or by the hand, so that you know you're not going to fall. You've got people around you. That's the faith. Those are the cloud of witnesses that we're surrounded by as we go along this road to the heaven that Jesus has promised us we'll head toward. And that's what Hebrews talks about. That mountain, that new Jerusalem, that Zion, that new Jerusalem that is filled with angels and archangels, all in glory and singing praises and wonders to God, and all the place that we will be because Jesus is there preparing your place for you and for me. When he comes again in glory to judge the living and the dead, as we say in the Creed, when we experience their resurrection from the dead, as we say in the Creed, we will be there in that place. That's the place where we're going, and we want to go there. We're excited to go there. It's a wonderful place. It's not like Mount Sinai. That's the part that I didn't read, so I could tell you about it. It's not like Mount Sinai where the people of Israel went. We talk about that often, but what we don't often say is this. The people left Egypt, they crossed the Red Sea, they went through the desert, they came to Mount Sinai, and I often say Moses went up there and he got the Ten Commandments and came back down. So, what we don't often say is Moses went up that mountain by himself. He went up Mount Sinai by himself. Here's why. They got to Mount Sinai, and at the top of the mountain it was like a volcano. It was clouds and thick darkness and thunder and lightning and all of a sudden, and the people looked up at that and they said, go ahead, you go, we'll wait down here. We don't want to die. And Moses said, but God is up there. And they said, that's fine. We don't want to die in the presence of the Lord. We'll wait down here. And God himself told Moses, you come up by yourself. Don't let anybody else come up here because they'll die. And they'll say, see, that's what we just said. We don't want to go up there. God said, in fact, don't let anybody touch the mountain. They said, we're fine with that. They built a fence around the foot of the mountain so they couldn't even come close. They didn't want to come close to Mount Sinai, so Moses went up, and they figured, yeah, well, Moses, if you die up there, we'll just have a nice memorial service and we'll move on. But that's not the mountain that we're headed to. That's not where we're going. We're not going to a mountain that's full of thunder and lightning and fearsome, horrible things. We're headed toward the new Jerusalem, the new kingdom, the place where Jesus said, I'm going to take you. I'm going to come and bring you there, and you live with me forever, and it'll be wondrous and glorious, and we will not have any of this to put up with anymore, whatever it is we're putting up with these days. And there's a lot we have to put up with. We will be raised once again like Jesus was. Not like Lazarus, although Lazarus' resurrection was marvelous, and there's a picture of it on the front cover of the announcement folder. It's a wonderful, wonderful icon. My wife's niece was just over in Jordan a couple weeks ago and took this picture at a monastery. Put it on her Facebook page, and I said, wow, that's a terrific picture. That's the resurrection of Lazarus, the raising of Lazarus. I saw it right away. I said, there it is. There's Jesus over on the left-hand side. He's raising Lazarus. Mary and Martha are at his feet. They're crying. But they've already got the cover off the coffin. They're unwrapping Lazarus. I didn't even have to read the caption to know that's the raising of Lazarus. It's awesome. And that's the way Lazarus' raising was. It was awesome, and people were talking about it all through the community of Bethany and all through Jerusalem. And to tell you the truth, that scared the Pharisees and the scribes and the priests so much that when they were plotting to kill Jesus, they said, we got to get rid of Lazarus too, because he's the evidence. You know, got to get rid of the evidence, right? And he's the evidence. And we never heard whether they actually did. I don't think they did, because Lazarus hung around for a while. They never got rid of it. They got rid of Jesus, but Jesus rose again on the third day and ascended into heaven, as we say. But our rising will not be like Lazarus rising. Lazarus rose again, and then he died eventually. It will be like Jesus rising will be our resurrection. A resurrection to eternal life, to glory in the city that God is preparing for us. The New Jerusalem. Jerusalem the golden, the one that's described at the end of the book of Revelation. The city that will have no end and no tears, and that will welcome all people into the grace and the glory and the love and the mercy of God. A wondrous, wondrous place. And therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, and since that's the place that we're headed to, let us throw off the sin that so easily entangles and everything else that gets in the way, and let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, such as Hebrews says. And he is already seated at the right hand of the throne of God, and we are headed that way one of these days. Let us continue to walk that way. Let us continue to go that way. Let's run the race that's set before us. Let's persevere. All right, well, I don't know about you, but I don't do a whole lot of running anymore. I have my fancy shoes on, but I don't do a lot of running anymore. It hurts too much. And I can't do it so much anymore. But let's imagine that we're at least walking, okay? I mean, you know, we can sort of do that. Let's imagine that we're walking along the path to heaven, and we'll try that at any rate. And yes, folks, sorry, gotta leave your cars in the parking lot for this imaginary trip. I know, that'll be tough. Leave the cars in the parking lot because we're walking. And it's something, you know, you gotta think about walking along a sidewalk. And walking a sidewalk is not bad because it's flat and it's mostly even, except where the bumps up against each other, but that's right. It's mostly flat and it's mostly even and you do okay. But if you're walking through the woods, for instance, and you're walking along a trail through the park, it's a lot more uneven. It's kind of muddy, and there are twigs and sticks and branches and leaves and stuff like that along the trail in the woods. And so you got to watch for those things. And if you're walking, you can mostly see them coming, and you can step over them, and you can step them around them. But if you're running along a trail in the woods, you're running too fast, you can't see them coming. So, well, I learned this a couple weeks ago, that people who run trails, and if you've walked in the Park District, you know, recently, you've seen people do that. You know, they run the trails. For some reason or other, people like to run. But they run the trails in the Park District. And what I learned a couple weeks ago is trail runners don't like to have long shoelaces. Okay? They like to have short shoelaces like these. Okay? And the reason they like to have short shoelaces is because long shoelaces with long loops, they tend to get tangled up in twigs and branches and leaves and stuff like that. And that trips them up. Maybe the long shoelaces get undone and they trip on the shoelaces themselves. But, you know, if maybe you've done this in your yard anyway. You're walking through the yard, you know, mowing the grass or something. You pick up a twig with your shoelaces, and the next thing you know, you're kicking the thing or whatever. But people who are running the trails don't like to wear long shoelaces because they get caught up in the twigs and the branches, and the next thing you know, flat on their face. You don't want that to happen. So they wear short shoelaces. So I got to thinking about this with Hebrews. Let us get rid of the sin that so easily entangles. And I thought, you know what, we talk about sin as if all sin were the big deal sins. So if I said, you know, let's talk about sin, and did you sin yesterday? You know, people automatically seem to go to, let's see, 5th commandment, thou shalt not kill. Anybody here shoot anybody yesterday? No? Okay, we're good. That's fine. 7th commandment, thou shalt not steal. Anybody here rob a bank yesterday? Raise your hand. No, nobody robbed a bank. Okay, we're all good. Then we're fine. So we think about these big deal sins like this, right? But Hebrews says, let us get rid of the sin that so easily entangles so that we can run the race with perseverance. And I thought, you know, what about the shoelace sins? What about the shoelace sins? The ones that aren't big deal sins, the ones that are just like twigs and branches that get tangled up in our shoelaces and boom, down we go. I started scratching my head. What would a shoelace sin look like? What would these little things look like that get us tangled up and cause us to go kaboom? And I thought, we had a good example this week. There was a good example this week. And you know, there's always a good example for these sermons that either come from the Sunday comics or from a politician. So, which are interchangeable Sundays. But the shoelace sin example this week comes from Vice President Mike Pence. Now, I don't know if you heard this story about Mike Pence this week, but here's what happened. In some interview or other, he made a comment that he has this personal policy that he tries not to have dinner alone with a woman who is not his wife. He wants to make sure that his wife is there. If he's going to have dinner with some woman that he's not married to, he wants to make sure his wife is there. Okay? That's his personal policy. Well, the talk shows got a hold. I mean, it was just a comment. The talk shows got a hold of this. The morning news got a hold of this. Twitter got a hold of this. It's been all over the electronic. I mean, it's just been, people have been going nuts over this comment. And I won't tell you how they've been going nuts over it, because the way they've been going nuts over it has been driving me nuts. But you know, this is, to me, this is a good example of where a shoelace sin lies. 6th commandment, which the commandment is, thou shalt not commit adultery. But in the Small Catechism, Luther said, what this means is this: we should live a chaste and decent life and each love and honor his spouse. That's fair enough. But how do you love and honor your spouse on a day-to-day basis? What exactly are the things that you do to honor the person that you're married to? That's where the shoelace sin idea comes in, and that's where I think what Mike Pence has done is said, this is where a place is where honoring the spouse has to happen. I'm going to make sure as a personal policy that I'm not going to be in a position where my spouse has to explain me or apologize for me or wonder about me. That's how I'm going to honor my spouse. Now, I don't know about you all. I know about our marriage, mine and my wife's. And I know that there are some times, and maybe this is a guy thing, there are some times when I do some things where my wife looks at me and goes, I wonder about you sometimes. So, are there times when I ought to look at myself and the things that I do and say, in order to honor the person that I'm married to, maybe I shouldn't do that thing, so that she doesn't have to wonder. And maybe if that's a public thing, I shouldn't do that thing, so that she doesn't have to explain me to somebody else. And maybe there are some times when I shouldn't do that thing, so she doesn't have to apologize for me either and say, even saying, oh, this is just the way he is, is that fair to her? Is that honoring her as my wife? If I'm doing things where she's always saying, oh, it's just the way he is, or apologizing for my behaviors, that's, is that? Of course, I don't know how many of you guys, men, do that, where your wife is saying, I'm sorry for what my husband did. Or on the other hand, maybe it works the other way around. I don't know. My wife never does this to me, but maybe some wives do that to your husband is like, I'm sorry for what my wife said. I'm sorry she did. Is that honoring to the person that you're married to, where we do things that they have to apologize for? Is it honoring to them to put them in an awkward position? Maybe? I guess maybe that's the question, and that's the shoelace sin. Is it a big deal? I don't know. Maybe it is to the person you're married to, but it's not on the same level as murder. It's not on the same level as robbing a bank. Maybe it's a shoelace sin, but it causes somebody to go like that. Is it a big deal sin? Well, I'll tell you where it is a big deal sin. Here is where it is. And I've often said this when I do wedding circles. You get a bride and groom standing there, and they're all excited, and they're going to get married, and they're going to pledge their love to each other, and they are so desperately in love with each other that, the whole place reeks of it. We love each other, we love each other. And you say, you love each other so much that if one of you needed a kidney from the other, you'd be, yeah, I'm giving her a kidney right now, just cut me open right now, she needs a kidney. Yes, absolutely, that's what I would do. I'd sacrifice anything for her. I would say, and yet, here's where the fights are. The fights are never about kidneys. The fights are always about whether the toilet paper comes over this way or this way, aren't they? Or if not about whether it comes over this way, the fights are always about whether the roll got empty and then replaced or not. That's where the fights go. And the fights always go to whether the toothpaste is being squeezed from the middle or from the end. That's where the fights go and where they escalate from. And when the divorce happens, we can usually trace it back to either the toothpaste or the toilet paper. You laugh. But I'm right. That's why you're laughing. Okay? Because it doesn't come down to the big deal sins. It comes down to the shoelace sins that trip us up. And that cause us to fall. And the problem is sometimes when we fall in the shoelace sins, we take others down with us, but we don't have to. As if we're aware of the shoelace sins and we get, and we disentangle ourselves from those. We don't have to take others down with us when we trip and fall. Other people who are around us, including the people that we're married to, can hold us up when we start to struggle. And they can grab us by the hand or the elbow or the shoulder or the arm and say, wait, I'll hold you up. Stop here, we can do this. You don't have to do that. Shoelace sins like, do you wake up grumpy every morning? Or do you let him sleep? Ha ha, no. But, yeah, I asked that. Should you be doing that? gripe at each other all the time. Remember the radio show The Bickersons? It was a terrible show. Everybody Loves Raymond. Remember that one? What a terrible book. Martin Luther said something like this. This is one of the best pieces of marriage advice I ever heard. Okay? Said something like this. Basically boils down to this. Wives, your husbands ought to look forward to coming home to you every night. Husbands, your wives ought to look forward to having you be the one that walks through that door every night. That's kind of what it boils down to. Everything else is kind of a shoelace. Don't cause one another to trip and fall, but hold one another up and build one another up and help us to get together and walk along the path and get to where we're all going. And not only the person that we're married to, but our friends around us and the people that you see seated around you like this in this place, and the people that you know out on the street, and your friends, and the people that come to early service, and all the others. We're all walking the path together. We're all running the race together. We're all headed to the same glorious city together. It's going to take some of us a while to get there. It's going to take all of us a while to get there. And there's plenty of sticks and twigs and things that we could stumble into along the way. But we're surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses. We're surrounded by friends and people of faith to give substance to our faith, to the things we hope for, to give evidence to the things we believe in, and to help one another along the way so that we can get there with as few scrapes and bruises and bumps as possible. To hold us up so that when we get there we can see the angels rejoicing to welcome us in, along with people like Mary and Martha and Lazarus, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Enoch, Abel, Adam, and all the rest. In Jesus' name, amen. Please turn to page 6 of the worship folder, and let's read together.